Right now, in rooms you'll never enter, people are sitting in silence watching footage of you on repeat. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something impossible. They're scrolling backwards through timestamps, pausing on moments where you should have walked into their trap but somehow turned left instead. They're analyzing your face in that meeting where you should have signed the contract but didn't. They're studying the exact second you put down that drink without tasting it. And what's driving them absolutely insane is that there's no logical explanation for how you knew. No evidence that anyone warned you. No proof that you were suspicious. You just knew, and that shouldn't be possible. The footage shows you walking past opportunities designed specifically for you. It captures you declining invitations that seemed perfect on the surface. It records you changing your mind at the last possible second for no reason anyone can identify. Security cameras, phone records, email timestamps. They're combing through everything trying to find the moment someone tipped you off, the message they missed, the conversation they didn't monitor. But there's nothing there. And that absence of evidence is more terrifying to them than any confrontation could ever be. Because if nobody warned you, if nothing obvious happened, then you're operating on a frequency they can't track, accessing information through channels they don't control. What you need to understand is that these aren't random people reviewing footage. And these are individuals who spent significant time and resources setting up situations designed to benefit them at your expense. They built scenarios that should have been irresistible to you. They crafted opportunities that looked too good to refuse. They engineered moments where saying yes was the only logical response. They studied your patterns, your habits, your weaknesses. They knew your schedule better than you did. They understood your triggers. And still, impossibly, you avoided every single setup without ever knowing it was a setup. That's what has them rewinding footage at 3 a.m, trying to decode a mystery that has no solution. The truth they're desperately trying to avoid accepting is this: you weren't operating on information. You were operating on something they don't have access to. Your intuition has been upgraded to a level that bypasses their entire system of manipulation. And the moment they realize they can't track it, can't predict it, can't control it, everything about how they interact with you has to change. They're not reviewing footage to figure out what you know. They're reviewing footage to figure out if you're still someone they can play. And every frame is giving them the same answer: absolutely not. There was a meeting scheduled 4 months ago that never made sense to cancel, but you canceled it anyway. You couldn't explain why at the time. You just woke up that morning with this heaviness, this resistance, this quiet knowing that you shouldn't be in that room. So you sent an apologetic email, came up with a reasonable excuse, then rescheduled for a date that never actually happened, because by then the whole situation had revealed itself for what it truly was. But here's what you didn't know. 3 people were in that conference room waiting for you with documents already prepared, signatures ready, terms that would have locked you into something that benefited them enormously, while slowly draining you over the next 18 months. They had planned this for weeks. The meeting was strategically timed when you'd be most vulnerable, most tired, most likely to just agree to move things forward. The contract was designed to look simple on the surface, while containing clauses that would activate later. Clauses you wouldn't notice until you were already committed. They knew exactly what they were doing. They'd done this before to others. It was a proven system, and you were supposed to be the next person caught in it. Except you never showed up, Not because someone warned you, not because you read between the lines of their emails, but because something in you simply said no, without giving you a concrete reason. Now they're reviewing the email chain, trying to figure out what tipped you off. They're analyzing the tone of their messages, looking for the moment they revealed too much. They're questioning each other about who might have leaked information. But nobody leaked anything. There was nothing to leak. The setup was flawless on paper. What they can't comprehend is that your system doesn't need paper evidence to detect danger. Your intuition was reading energy signatures they didn't even know they were broadcasting. The overconfidence in their emails, the slight eagerness that felt just a bit too intense. The way the opportunity was positioned as time-sensitive without a clear reason why, all of that registered in your subconscious as wrong, even though your conscious mind couldn't articulate it. They've pulled footage from the parking lot cameras showing the days leading up to that meeting. They're watching you come and go from the building, looking for signs of stress, hesitation, or awareness. But you looked completely normal. You weren't acting paranoid. You weren't visibly suspicious. You were just living your life. And then suddenly, the morning of the meeting, you weren't there. What the footage can't show them is the download you received in your sleep, the dream you barely remembered that left you with an uneasy feeling, the ancestral whisper that redirected your entire day without you consciously processing why. They're looking for evidence in the physical world of a decision made in a dimension they don't believe exists. There's surveillance footage from a social gathering 6 weeks ago that they've watched at least 20 times. In it, you're handed a drink. You smile. You say thank you. You hold it for approximately 7 minutes. You bring it close to your lips twice. And then, for no apparent reason, you set it down on a table and walk away. You never pick it up again. You never finish it. Most people wouldn't remember this moment because nothing dramatic happened. But the person who handed you that drink remembers. And they're trying to figure out what went wrong. That drink wasn't poisoned in any dramatic or illegal sense, but it was intentionally prepared in a way designed to make you more agreeable, more talkative, more vulnerable to suggestion. Maybe it was stronger than you'd expect. Maybe it had something added that would make you slightly off balance. The details don't matter as much as the intention behind it, which was to lower your defenses during a conversation that was planned to extract information from you, information they could use later. They needed you loose-lipped, unguarded, oversharing. They needed you to reveal things you normally wouldn't. And the drink was supposed to facilitate that without you ever suspecting anything. But you didn't drink it, not because you suspected them specifically, but because something in your system rejected it before it ever reached your bloodstream. Maybe you noticed the taste was slightly off. Maybe your stomach suddenly felt full. Maybe you just lost interest. Whatever the surface reason, the deeper truth is that your body has developed detection systems that activate automatically when something threatens your well-being. You're not consciously testing every drink for safety. You're not paranoid or hyper-vigilant. You're just tuned to a frequency of self-preservation that operates without your direct input. The footage shows them watching you set the drink down. It captures the microsecond of confusion on their face. It records them trying to casually offer you another drink later, which you also politely declined. They're reviewing this footage not because they're angry, but because they're genuinely baffled. From their perspective, they did everything right. The approach was friendly. The drink looked normal. The environment was comfortable. There was no red flag that should have alerted you. Yet somehow, you knew not to consume what they offered. And that knowing, that unexplainable awareness, is what's keeping them up at night, reviewing security footage, trying to find an explanation that doesn't exist in any visible form. Phone records show an incoming call to your number 3 months ago at 9:47 p.m. The call lasted 6 seconds before you declined it. They've analyzed those 6 seconds extensively. They want to know if you looked at the caller ID and recognized a pattern. They want to know if someone else was in the room advising you not to answer. They want to know if you've somehow developed technology that screens calls for malicious intent. But the reality is simpler and more frustrating for them. You just didn't feel like answering. There was no dramatic reason, no conscious suspicion, just an absence of desire to engage at that particular moment. What you didn't know is that call was strategically timed. They knew you'd likely be alone at that hour. They knew you'd probably be winding down, less guarded, more open to casual conversation. They had talking points, prepared, designed to sound like friendly check-ins while actually gathering intel about your current projects, your relationships, your plans. They wanted to plant seeds of doubt about certain people in your life. They wanted to position themselves as trustworthy while subtly undermining your confidence in others. The entire conversation was mapped out with specific outcomes in mind. And it all depended on you answering that call, but you didn't. And because you didn't, an entire chain of manipulation never got initiated. They couldn't plant the seeds they wanted to plant. They couldn't gather the information they needed. They couldn't position themselves the way they planned. One declined call disrupted weeks of preparation. And now they're trying to figure out if you somehow knew what that call really was, or if you're just incredibly, impossibly lucky. They've reviewed your phone activity before, and after that call looking for patterns, did you immediately call someone else for advice? Did you search for their number online? Did you block them afterwards? No. You just declined the call and went back to whatever you were doing as if nothing significant happened. The footage of you during that time period, pulled from various sources, shows someone completely relaxed and unaware of any threat. You weren't pacing nervously. You weren't looking over your shoulder. You were just existing in your space, protected by an intuition so natural you don't even recognize it as protection. And that's what makes you so difficult to manipulate. You're not actively defending against attacks because you're not conscious of being under attack. You're just flowing with an inner guidance system that redirects you away from harm without triggering fear or paranoia. They're used to people they can rattle, people they can make nervous, people whose anxiety they can exploit. But you're not giving them anything to work with because you're not operating in that frequency. There's a document that was prepared specifically for you that remains unsigned in someone's files. They spent considerable time drafting it, making sure every clause appeared beneficial to you while actually serving their interests. They consulted with experts to ensure the language was convincing. They ran scenarios to anticipate your questions. They prepared responses to every possible objection, and then they scheduled a meeting to present it to you, confident that you'd sign because from every logical angle, it made sense for you to sign. Except when the moment came, you hesitated. Not a big dramatic hesitation, just a pause. Let me think about it. Can I review this with someone? A simple request for time that seemed completely reasonable, but absolutely destroyed their timeline. Because the document was time-sensitive in ways you weren't told about. It needed your signature by a specific date to lock you into terms that would become active later. The delay you requested pushed everything past that window, and by the time you finally got around to reviewing it more carefully, circumstances had changed enough that the whole thing became irrelevant. You never ended up signing, not because you did deep research and uncovered their scheme, but because you just kept putting it off for reasons you couldn't quite articulate. They have footage from that meeting. They've analyzed your facial expressions frame by frame. They're looking for the moment you became suspicious, the second you saw through their presentation, the tell that revealed you knew more than you were letting on. But there's nothing there. But you looked engaged, interested, even appreciative of the opportunity. You asked good questions. You seemed genuinely considerate. And then you just didn't sign. You didn't argue against it. You didn't accuse them of anything. You just needed more time. Time that ultimately resulted in you never moving forward with it at all. What they can't see in any footage is the conversation you had with yourself internally. The subtle discomfort you felt that you couldn't name. The quiet voice that said, "Not yet," even though logic said, "Why not?" They can't track the energy reading you did without knowing you were doing it. They can't measure the intuitive hit that registered as mild hesitation rather than screaming alarm. Your protection doesn't always show up as dramatic revelation or obvious warning. Sometimes it shows up as simple reluctance, or as a feeling of maybe later, as a gentle redirect that keeps you from committing to something that looks good on the surface, but would cost you significantly beneath it. And because you honored that subtle guidance without needing it to be loud or clear, you avoided an entanglement they spent months engineering. There's someone in your orbit who reports back to people you don't know about. Not in a dramatic spy thriller way, but in a casual, just keeping them updated kind of way. This person asks you questions that seem like normal, friendly interest. How's work going? What are you working on? Are you seeing anyone? What are your plans for the next few months? Standard conversation. Except every answer you give gets summarized and passed along to individuals who are tracking your movements, your projects, your relationships, is your state of mind. Not because they care about you, but because they're monitoring you for opportunities, vulnerabilities, or information they can use. And here's what's fascinating. You've never told this person anything important. Not because you consciously identified them as untrustworthy, but because every time they ask probing questions, you give vague, surface-level answers. You're friendly but not forthcoming. You're pleasant but not detailed. You share just enough to maintain social politeness without actually revealing anything substantial. And this drives them absolutely crazy because they can't figure out if you're onto them or if you're just naturally private. They've reviewed conversations trying to determine if you're being strategically evasive or just happen to be someone who doesn't overshare. The truth is, you're not consciously withholding information from them specifically. You just don't feel the openness with them that would inspire deeper sharing. There's no flow, no energetic invitation, no sense of safety that would make you want to be vulnerable. So you keep things light, and that lightness, that natural boundary you maintain without even thinking about it, has protected you from exposure you don't even know was threatened. They wanted to know your weak points, so they could be exploited later. They wanted to understand your relationships so they could interfere with them. They wanted details about your projects so they could undermine or steal them. But you never gave them access to any of that. Not through conscious strategy, but through intuitive selectivity. And there's no footage of this protection because it's happening in what you don't say, in the information you don't provide, in the boundaries you maintain automatically. They can watch you interact with this person, and everything looks normal and friendly. But what they can't see is the energetic wall you've built without trying to build it. The natural discernment that keeps your treasures protected without you having to consciously guard them. You're not paranoid. You're not suspicious of everyone. You're just reading people on a level that informs your behavior before your conscious mind processes why. After reviewing months of footage, data, and interactions, they've come to a disturbing conclusion. You don't have a predictable pattern. Most people do. Most people follow routines that can be studied and anticipated. Wake up at the same time, take the same route to work, eat at the same places, respond to the same triggers. Predictability is what makes people easy to manipulate, because when you know what someone will do, you can position yourself accordingly. But you keep changing things up in ways that seem random, but consistently disrupt their plans. Sometimes you take a different route home for no reason. Sometimes you cancel regular appointments spontaneously. Sometimes you change your schedule last minute. Sometimes you're exactly where they expect you to be. And sometimes you're nowhere near it. There's no pattern to your unpredictability. You're not trying to evade anyone because you're not aware anyone's watching. You're just flowing with your own rhythms, following impulses, honoring sudden changes of mind. To what feels like spontaneity to you looks like sophisticated counter-surveillance to them. They can't tell if you're trained in evasion tactics or if you're just impossible to pin down by nature. The footage they have shows someone living freely without the rigidity that makes people easy targets. You're not locked into systems. You're not enslaved to routine. You're not predictable enough to trap because you're genuinely present to each moment rather than operating on autopilot. And this flexibility, this willingness to change direction when something in you suggests it, has kept you out of situations that were set up based on assumptions about where you'd be and when you'd be there. They've had to abandon multiple plans because you simply weren't where you were supposed to be, not because you knew to avoid those places, but because you followed an inner compass that redirected you without explanation. What makes you particularly difficult to track is that your unpredictability isn't chaotic. You're not scattered or unreliable. You still show up for genuine commitments. You still honor real appointments. You're just not bound by the kind of rigid patterns that make people easy to ambush. Your lifestyle has a fluid quality that looks like freedom to you, but looks like impenetrability to them. They can't find the gaps because your energy doesn't create consistent gaps. You're too present, too responsive to moment-by-moment guidance, too willing to pivot when something feels off. And all of that protection is happening automatically, without you ever having to think about security or strategy. Someone close to you, maybe family, maybe a colleague, or maybe an old friend, approached you months ago with an investment opportunity that seemed legitimate. They had numbers, projections, testimonials. They showed you how others had benefited. They explained why this was perfect timing. They made it sound not just safe, but smart. And they really wanted you to participate, not just casually wanted, but persistently, repeatedly encouraged you to get involved. Looking back now, you can see how hard they pushed. But at the time, you just kept feeling resistance without clear reason why. You made polite excuses. You said you needed to think about it. You mentioned you weren't in a position to invest right now. You were nice about it, but firm. And no matter how many times they circled back, you never moved forward with it. Not because you researched it and found problems. That was not because someone warned you against it, but because something in you just wouldn't say yes. That same something that has protected you before showed up again as simple, unexplainable resistance. And you honored it, even though you couldn't defend it logically. What you didn't know until recently is that investment wasn't what it appeared to be. Others who participated are now dealing with consequences you avoided entirely. Money disappeared into structures that benefited the organizers while leaving participants with losses they can't recover. The whole thing was designed to look legitimate long enough to collect funds, then shift into something else entirely. And you would have been caught in it if you'd ignored your hesitation and invested anyway, just to keep the peace or prove you trusted them. But you didn't. You protected your resources by listening to a knowing that had no evidence to support it at the time. Now they're reviewing every interaction they had with you about that opportunity. They're trying to figure out how you knew it was problematic. They're searching for the moment someone must have warned you, the research you must have done, the insider information you must have accessed. But there's nothing. You didn't investigate. You didn't consult experts. You didn't do background checks. You just felt a quiet no and respected it. And that's incomprehensible to people who rely on logic and manipulation to achieve their goals. They can't manipulate someone whose decision-making system operates outside the realm of logic. They can't argue with a no that doesn't need to defend itself with reasons. When there was a trip planned for you months ago, everything was arranged. Tickets purchased, accommodations booked, schedule cleared. People were expecting you. And then, 3 days before you were supposed to leave, you canceled. Not because of an emergency, not because something obviously wrong happened. You just woke up with this absolute clarity that you weren't supposed to go. The feeling was so strong you couldn't ignore it, even though canceling meant losing money, disappointing people, and looking flaky or unreliable. You canceled anyway because the internal no was louder than any external pressure to follow through. People were confused. Some were frustrated. They wanted explanations you couldn't really give. "I just don't feel right about it," isn't the kind of reason people accept easily, especially when real money and real plans are involved. But you stood firm. You absorbed the disappointment, took the financial hit, and stayed home. And within a week, you found out that trip would have put you in the same space as people who had plans for you that weren't in your best interest. Not dangerous in a physical sense, but strategically positioned to corner you into conversations, commitments, or situations that would have benefited them significantly, while costing you in ways you wouldn't realize until much later. They have records of your cancellation. They've analyzed the timing, trying to figure out who warned you. They've questioned whether someone else who was supposed to be there tipped you off. They've searched for evidence of communication between you and anyone who might have known their plans. But there's no evidence because there was no warning from any human source. What warned you was the same system that's been protecting you all along. An inner knowing that doesn't require external validation. You felt the danger without seeing it. You sensed the setup without understanding it. And you honored that sensing even when it cost you money and reputation. The footage of you during that time shows someone completely at peace with their decision. You weren't anxious or paranoid. You weren't looking over your shoulder or acting afraid. You just calmly canceled and went about your life. And that calmness is what disturbs them most, because it suggests you're operating with confidence in information they can't access. They're used to people who second-guess themselves, who can be pressured into changing their minds, who feel guilty enough to override their intuition. But you're not that person. You make decisions based on internal authority, and then you stand in them without needing anyone's approval or understanding. That level of self-trust makes you nearly impossible to manipulate, because manipulation requires doubt, and you're not doubting yourself anymore. Here's what all the footage review, all the analysis, all the questioning really comes down to. They're trying to avoid accepting a truth that terrifies them. You're not lucky. You're not randomly stumbling away from their traps. You're not being tipped off by informants. You're operating with a level of awareness they can't track, can't predict, and can't control. Your intuition has been upgraded to a frequency that reads energy before situations fully form. You're detecting danger before it becomes visible. You're sensing deception before it's spoken. You're avoiding traps before they're fully set. And you're doing all of this naturally, automatically, without conscious effort or strategic planning. What makes you so frustrating to people who operate through manipulation is that you can't be studied and then exploited because you're not consistent enough to study. You're not predictable enough to trap. You're not unconscious enough to deceive. Every time they think they understand how you operate, you flow in a different direction, guided by something they can't measure. They're trying to use third-dimensional strategies against someone operating in fifth-dimensional awareness. They're trying to manipulate someone whose decisions aren't made purely by logic or emotion, but by a deeper knowing that synthesizes information from sources they don't believe exist. The security footage they're reviewing so obsessively will never give them the answers they want, because cameras can only capture physical reality. They can't record the download you received in meditation. They can't timestamp the ancestral whisper you heard in your sleep. They can't document the energetic signature you read that told you something was off. They can't measure the soul level knowing that redirected your path before danger fully materialized. All they can see is the result. You walking away from situations designed to capture you, declining offers engineered to trap you, avoiding people positioned to manipulate you. And from their limited perspective, it looks either like impossible luck or evidence that you know far more than you should. The reality is simpler and more powerful than they can comprehend. You've been awakened to a level of perception that makes their games obvious, even when you're not consciously analyzing them. Your system reads what's beneath the surface. Your intuition processes data faster than your thinking mind can follow. Your protection activates before threats become emergencies. You're not trying to outsmart them. You're just living in alignment with guidance that keeps you exactly where you need to be and away from everywhere you don't. And no amount of surveillance, analysis, or footage review will ever decode a protection system that operates outside the frequency they're monitoring. Understanding that people are reviewing footage of you and analyzing your patterns, trying to figure out how you knew to avoid their setups. This isn't meant to make you paranoid. It's meant to validate what you've already been sensing. You felt watched. You felt studied. You felt like people were trying to figure you out in ways that felt intrusive, even when they seemed friendly. And you were right. But here's the important part. Their analysis is pointless, because what protects you can't be learned, can't be copied, and can't be defeated by any strategy they develop. Your protection comes from alignment with something greater than tactical thinking. It comes from trusting yourself, even when you can't explain yourself. It comes from honoring your intuition, even when it costs you socially or financially. It comes from being willing to look unreasonable, flaky, or overly cautious in other people's eyes because you value your inner knowing more than their approval. Every time you've honored that quiet voice, every time you've respected that subtle hesitation, every time you've said no without having to justify why, you've strengthened a protection system that's now operating automatically on your behalf. The footage they're reviewing is just confirmation of what you already represent. Someone who can't be played because you're not playing their game. Someone who can't be trapped because you flow too freely. Someone who can't be deceived because you read too deeply. They're scrambling to understand you because understanding gives the illusion of control. But you're not something to be understood through observation and analysis. You're someone to be experienced as a mystery, as a force that moves according to laws they don't recognize, as a presence that disrupts their plans simply by being authentically aligned with your own path. Now that you know people are reviewing footage trying to decode how you knew, what changes? Nothing externally. You don't need to become more careful or more strategic. You don't need to look over your shoulder or second-guess every interaction. You don't need to live in fear or suspicion. What changes is your confidence in what's already protecting you. What changes is your trust in the guidance you've been receiving. What changes is your willingness to honor your intuition even when it doesn't make logical sense. Even when you can't explain it to others, even when it disrupts plans or disappoints people. They can review all the footage they want. They can analyze every decision, to every canceled appointment, every declined offer, every conversation where you stayed surface level instead of diving deep. What they'll find is someone who moves with an intelligence that doesn't fit their models, who operates with awareness that bypasses their monitoring systems, who lives with freedom that can't be contained by their predictions. And the more they study you, the more they'll realize they're not dealing with someone who's simply being cautious or strategic. They're dealing with someone who's tapped into guidance that makes their entire approach obsolete. Your job isn't to outthink them, outsmart them, or even be aware of specific threats. Your job is to keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Listening to yourself, trusting yourself, honoring the subtle nudges and quiet knowings that have been guiding you all along. Feed every time you respect your intuition without needing it to be loud or dramatic. You're activating protection that works in ways that can't be captured on camera, tracked in data, or understood through analysis. You're living proof that awareness operates on frequencies beyond surveillance, that wisdom flows through channels beyond monitoring, that protection exists in dimensions beyond physical security. So let them review the footage. Let them analyze your patterns. Let them try to figure out how you knew. While they're busy searching for answers in recordings of the past, you're already moving forward, guided by something they'll never capture on camera. The unshakable knowing that you're exactly where you need to be, protected by forces they don't believe in, aligned with a path they can't trace. They're living a life they'll never be able to predict or control. And that's not something to fear. That's something to celebrate.